and I was on the Chain of Iron Wikipedia page and I saw that Cassie had said that Pickles will have a mermaid love interest, and I swear, if this is Clarabella, the weird half mermaid, I will riot. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be analysing and breaking down those Chain of Iron chapter titles that Cassie released in her January newsletter last week. So I actually had someone message me on my Bookstagram asking if I would analyse these titles, and at the same time my friend Fede messaged me that she'd already began her own analysis, and so I thought why not combine the two and invite Fede to be on this video with me and share her own analysis of these chapter titles. So using a mix of everything we know so far about Chain of Iron and some more research into Victorian and Edwardian poetry, me and Fede have managed to come up with what we think is going to go down in at least 2/3 of these chapters. So if you remember in chapters 1 and 2, it is the night before the Jordelia wedding. Matthew drops Cordelia off at the Hell Rule for her bachelorette party, and it's revealed that before the party, Lucy was actually over with Grace, attempting to resurrect Jessie from the dead. At the same time this bachelorette party is happening, over at the Devil Tavern, James and the Merry Thieves are having their own send-off, they're having their own stag do for James, and then chapter 2 ends with some intense Jessie and Lucy scenes that left me screaming. So because I have already analysed these chapters, and I will leave that video in the description below for you, we're going to start with chapter 3, Bitter and Sweet.
Chapter 3, titled Bitter and Sweet, is obviously the Jordelia wedding. We know this because chapter 2 ended the night before, and also thematically, bitter and sweet. What is more bittersweet than getting to marry the love of your life, but it's a sham marriage? At the end of Chain of Gold, Cordelia refers to her marrying James as a strange but bitter pleasure. I know that some people think that the wedding isn't actually going to take place. They think that something shocking might happen and that the wedding will have to be postponed. However, I think that something very shocking is going to happen very soon, but not yet in chapter 3. So I think Jordelia will get married and they will move out of the Institute and go live in a house of their own after this. Cue Jordelia domestic moments. Woohoo!
Hi, it's me again bringing you my thoughts on chapter 4, A Good Name. So as Fede has said, we think that chapter 3 is going to be the Jordelia wedding, so chapter 4 is going to be the post-wedding marital bliss. For me, the chapter title, A Good Name, refers to Cordelia's maiden name of Carstairs. We all know that Will and Tessa value this family name so much, and we know that they are going to be so happy that they can welcome a Carstairs into their family clan. So I think in this chapter we're going to get some really genuine feelings between James and Cordelia, as well as maybe some cute Western moments as they reminisce over their happy marriage. There is also the idea that this chapter title is referring to the saying, a good name is more desirable than riches, aka referring to the fact that James chose to marry Cordelia because he wanted to save her reputation. However, I am convinced that these two are endgame and they will end up staying in their marriage because they're going to realise they do still have genuine feelings for each other. The only other thing I want to say about this chapter title is that no doubt Will and Tessa's happiness over their son getting married will be harshly juxtaposed with Lucy thinking about how she so much wants to resurrect her dead boyfriend.
Now, chapter 5 is where things get scary. Chapter 5 is called The King is Dead. Now, who could be the king? With the fairy tale-esque allegory that The Last Hours is built upon, there is one clear royal family, and that is the Fairchilds. We had an entire Days Past chapter that didn't refer to people's names, but only referred to Matthew as the prince, Charlotte as the queen, and Henry as the king. I know it sounds extreme that such an important character as Henry would die so early on in the book, and I hope with everything in me that it doesn't actually happen, but it would make a strange sort of sense, also considering how we know that Matthew's behavior is going to get worse before it gets better. We also know that he moves out. Again, this is not what I want. I don't want Henry to die, and I don't want Matthew to move out right after his father's death. I would want him and his mother and his brother to be there for each other and support each other in these difficult times. So fingers crossed I'm wrong and this doesn't happen.
So we didn't actually get anything for chapter 6 and 7, so if you guys have any idea what these chapter titles could be, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know what you guys think. However, moving on to chapter 8, and the title is To Bring a Fire. So I think this chapter is going to focus on Cordelia and Lucy training to become Parvati. In Chain of Gold, we do get James saying that he's going to help Cordelia as she trains to become his sister's Parvati. Obviously, the ceremony held to bind these two Parvati together is called the Fiery Trial. It's all about the fire. Also, in some of Cassie's teaser snippets, she has shared some moments between Cordelia and Lucy where they are training for this ritual, and there's a few problems arising from the secrets that they are keeping from each other. I think think this chapter title also could be a nod to the fact that Cortana is burning Cordelia every time she picks it up. So here we have two so-called fiery situations that could go down in this chapter. Again, we couldn't get anything for chapters 9 and 10, but for chapter 11, boy, I got some stuff to tell you. So chapter 11, Crowns and Pounds and Guineas. So after some research, we found out that this chapter title was actually an extract from the poem When I Was 1 and 20. So I'm going to quickly read you the first stanza of this poem just so you understand the general vibe of what the hell is happening in it. So it goes, when I was 1 and 20, I heard a wise man say, give crowns and pounds and guineas, but not your heart away. Give pearls away and rubies, but keep your fancy free. But I was 1 and 20, no use to talk to me. So in this poem, the poem's speaker is basically saying that when he was 21, a wise man warned him of the perils in love and told him not to give away his heart. However, in stanza 2, the speaker recollects that he did it anyway because he was 21 and he didn't listen to his elders, and surprise, surprise, he got his heart broken. So in the second stanza, the speaker says that he is now 22, so he's essentially looking back on his 21-year-old self. So me and Fede did some intense maths and we worked out that the only notable character who is either 21 or 22 when Chain of Iron comes out is none other than Eugenia Lightwood. Obviously, we know that Cassie has confirmed that Eugenia will play a bigger role in Chain of Iron and that we will find out what happened to her, why she has been so-called dubbed as ruined. So I'm thinking we might get some long-awaited redemption for our girl Eugenia in this chapter. Unfortunately, chapters 12 and 13 got us stumped, but we did manage to work out what we think is going to go down in 14.
Chapter 14, titled The Flaming Forge. I am 100% sure this chapter will feature Cordelia going to look for Wayland the Smith. We had the shocking revelation in the first chapter of Chain of Iron that Wayland the Smith is actually alive. He's been alive for centuries. So there's this fairy who tells Cordelia this at the Hell Rule. So I am 100% sure what is going to happen in this chapter is Cordelia will have to visit Wayland the Smith because Cortana is burning her hands and she needs to figure out why. She will probably ask Matthew to accompany her. We know from Cassie that Matthew and Cordelia are going to go on a road trip together. We've seen a snippet of Matthew driving Cordelia somewhere in his brand new car. So the fairy told Cordelia that Wayland the Smith can be found under a barrow in the Berkshire Downs. First of all, under a barrow, doesn't that sound suspiciously familiar to the land under the hill, which we know to be fairy? Could Wayland the Smith be a fairy? Could he be connected to fairies? I think so, because if he were just a mortal man or a shadow hunter like we thought he was, how could he still be alive after all these centuries? But apart from that, I have done some research about where the Berkshire Downs are, and it's basically only a couple hours away from London, so it's a distance that Matthew and Cordelia could cover by car very easily. So I do think that this is where they have their heart-to-heart. We know Cassius teased that Cordelia and Matthew will have a very important conversation in this book where each of them comes clean about their secrets. And at that point, you know, after Matthew confesses that, it will be so easy for Cordelia to say, oh, my darkest secret is just that I'm in love with my husband. That's great. Like, I'm chilling. I'm doing amazing. I'm also just going to add super quickly that the chapter title, The Flaming Forge, comes from a poem called The Village Blacksmith by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And I just want to read you the last stanza, which contains the title of the chapter. It goes, thanks to thee, my friend, for the lesson thou hast taught. Thus at the flaming forge of life our fortunes must be wrought. Thus on its sounding anvil shaped each burning deed and thought. Doesn't this sound like it's preluding to an important conversation that's going to happen, to sharing secrets and life lessons? I think everything here points to Matthew and Cordelia having that conversation with each other and confessing their secrets.
Chapter 15, Walk by Daytime. I think this is going to be a really big chapter for Belial. So we saw in the prologue that Belial is now possessing a mortal body, which means he can in fact now walk on Earth. So we think this chapter is going to be a big serial killer or a big serial killer accusational chapter. Cassie has confirmed that a fair few shadow hunters actually die in Chain of Iron, and I feel like at this midpoint of the book it could be the peak of this. However, I do actually have a crackpot speculation theory to share with you guys for this chapter as well. well. If you guys have watched my video discussion of what the hell that family tree actually means, you will know that there are actually a fair few theories being thrown around about the fate of Matthew Fairchild. One of the most popular theories being that he will get his mark stripped and then turned into a downworlder. Arguably, the two most probable downworlders that Matthew will get turned into are a vampire or a werewolf, and so I think this chapter title, Walk by Daytime, might be a humorous nod to the fact that Matthew's end might be a bit more vampire-esque, aka at the end of this book he cannot indeed walk by daytime. I apologise in advance. So chapters 16 and 17 were a no-go, but Chapter 18, are you ready? So the title of Chapter 18, Goblin Market, refers to the poem by the same name by Christina Rossetti. So this narrative poem by Rossetti tells the story of Laura and Lizzie, who are tempted with fruit from goblin merchants. So here's an extract from the poem that you might actually recognise. Lie close, Laura said, pricking up her golden head. We must not look at goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they feed their hungry, thirsty roots? So you might recognise that extract from school, from college, or from university, or like me, you might recognise it from this Doctor Who episode. Okay, so I've come up with none other than 4 different theories to what this chapter could entail. So theory 1, Matthew Fairchild. So Matthew could in fact be the Laura in this poem with her aforementioned golden head. So the idea of Laura and Lizzie being tempted by goblin merchants has a strong parallel to what happens in Ghosts of the Shadow Market when Matthew takes the poison from the fairy, which then ends up causing his mum Charlotte to have a miscarriage. This makes me think then, if Matthew confesses to Cordelia in chapter 14 about what happened to his mum, it is then in chapter 18 that everyone else finds out the truth as well. Theory number 2, Christopher. Cassie has confirmed that Christopher will in fact visit the Shadow Market in Chain of Iron. My bets being that he either goes to the market for Grace or with Grace as they try to get some more ingredients for Lucy and Grace's attempted resurrection. So as this chapter title alludes to a situation that is similar to the Shadow Markets in the Shadowhunter universe, it makes me think that this chapter could be a big Christopher Lightwood chapter. Theory number 3, Lucy. So one of the big themes in this poem is the dangers of giving in to temptation. Could this chapter then be Lucy beginning to give into the temptation of necromancy, the necromancy she's attempting beginning to work, and then the devastating consequences of her necromantic powers and her necromantic actions? Theory number 4, everyone. So another theory of the Goblin Market poem is the redemptive power of love. In the poem, this redemptive power is shown through the fact that Lizzie risks everything to save Laura from a life of suffering because of the love that she has for her sister. Which siblings in the last hours contain a sister? Well, nearly all of them. We've got Cordelia and Alistair, we've got Grace and Jessie, we've got Lucy and James. So we think chapter 18, Goblin Market, is gonna be a big one.
Chapter 19 is called Thine Own Palace. It's a line taken from a poem by John Donne. The longer line goes, be thine own palace, or the words thy jail, meaning be your own place or the world will be your prison. So it basically, the poem, John Donne wrote it to his friend. It's a poem of farewell and of caution that John Donne wrote to his friend Sir Henry Wotton before Wotton left England to go and be an ambassador in Venice. So basically John Donne is cautioning him once there to stay in his lane, don't do things he's not supposed to do, or the world will become a prison. So in Chain of Iron, this could virtually be a conversation between anyone, really, between two friends, two parabatai, between a parent and a child, between Magnus even, who, you know, always exudes wisdom to anybody who will listen. So it could be Magnus talking to Matthew, Magnus talking to James. So I thought it could be Magnus talking to Matthew because, as we know, Magnus at the end of Chain of Gold is the only person who knows of Matthew's illicit feelings for Cordelia. If you want to believe that those are real or that Matthew even is in love with Cordelia, you can find more of that on my blog. At any rate, it is a conversation between two characters who clearly care about each other and one is cautioning the other to be careful.
Fast forward chapters 20 and 21 and we land at chapter 22, Heart of Iron. So we think this chapter title is a reference to the Holy Sonnets by John Donne, specifically the sonnet, Thou hast made me and shall thy work decay. So it took a while for Donne's poetry to become popular. Quote, it was not until the end of the 1800s that Donne's poetry was eagerly taken up by a growing band of avant-garde readers and writers. So my first thought here is of course King of the Green Carnation himself, Matthew Fairchild. God. So it's all about the speaker asking if God will let one of his own creations die. For example, the line, "Thou hast made me, and shall thy work decay?" So my immediate thought here is Matthew asking the clay for forgiveness when they are going to strip his marks. I run to death, and death meets me as fast. This could be Matthew's devastating fate in the Last Hours trilogy. And all my pleasures are like yesterday, aka all Matthew's drinking and all of Matthew's casual relationships, they're all of the past. By thy leave I can look, I rise again. Again, this could be Matthew begging the clave not to strip his marks, or as I've said before, this could be a nod to Matthew turning into a downworlder, specifically a vampire, with the I rise again, and then the final line, "And thou like adamant draw mine iron heart." Adamant, Adamas, Shadowhunter material. So the first time I read this sonnet, I immediately thought of Matthew. However, the first time that Fede read this sonnet, she actually thought of another character, Tatiana. So if you think about the style of Cassie's other novels, when she references these longer poems at the start of the chapter, she always ends up using one or two lines rather than the whole thing. So if we read this sonnet again with this in mind, the whole thing changes. Listen to this. "Thy grace may wing me to prevent his art, and thou like adamant draw mine iron heart." So there you've got your reference to Grace Blackthorn. There you've got your reference to the Adamant Citadel, aka where the Iron Sisters train, aka where Tatiana Blackthorn will be training to become an Iron Sister in Chain of Iron. Iron Heart, Iron Sister. So we think this chapter could equally be as much about Tatiana as it could be about Matthew as well. Chapter 23, Silken Thread, and we think this is a reference to the poem "O Lady, Leave Thy Silken Thread" by Thomas Hood. So because there's lots of interesting imagery in this poem, I think this chapter title could be explained in two ways. The first one as a collection of random imagery that alludes to characters in the Last Hours series, the silken thread being the thread that Matthew and Cordelia tied to James in Chain of Gold when he went into Belial's realm, living roses on the bush as an allusion to when James first went to trim the briars in 1899 at Blackthorn Hall, the daisy at thy feet obviously being Cordelia, and then you've got "there's fairy tulips in the east." In this line you've both got the mention of the Fae, and also the east could be a nod to Sona, Cordelia and Alistair's Persian roots. So that's one way to look at the poem. The slightly more English lit crackpot way of looking at this poem is that it's Jesse Blackthorn coming back to life and noticing all the amazing things in the real world that he has missed and that he hasn't appreciated for so long. This then makes Jesse the poem's speaker, saying "there's living roses on the bush and blossoms on the tree. 'Tis like the birthday of the world when earth was born in bloom. The light is made of many dyes, the air is all perfume. There's crimson buds and white and blue, the very rainbow showers." This is literally just Jesse appreciating the beauty of the world that he's been brought back into. This then makes the lady in the line, "Then lady, leave the silken thread thou twinest into flowers," none other than Lucy Herondale, which means that this so-called silken thread could be Lucy's link between the land and the living. This then leads to chapter 24, He Shall Rise, and I'm not kidding you, the only note I have on my Google Doc right now is "Jesse's back, bitches."
And so is Belial. Not ready? So the reason why I believe Belial is going to rise with Jesse, or even without Jesse, but this is for sure about Belial rising, is that Archangel Ruin is a phrase taken from John Milton's Paradise Lost that we know Cassandra loves, adores, the Mortal Instruments is based upon it. So what is happening at this point in the story in Paradise Lost is that the fallen archangels have just been cast out of heaven and they have just become princes of hell, greater demons, and they are assembling before Lucifer, Satan, and they are basically just waiting to hear him speak. While the line Archangel Ruin is referring to Lucifer himself in the original, I do think Cassandra is just borrowing it to befit Belial. After all, we've been told by various characters in Chain of Gold that while Lucifer is supposed to be the most beautiful of the fallen angels, Belial comes really close. So the full line goes, "He above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had not yet lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than Archangel ruined, and the excessive glory obscured." So really everything in these lines suggests that a greater demon being raised in glory, which obviously has to mean that Belial is successfully raised. And I hope that this doesn't happen when Lucy and Grace are performing the little necromancy to bring Jesse back, but it might just be Chapter 26 is called Older Than Gods. I believe this is referring to a poem by Swinburne, his Hymn to Proserpine. If you read the poem, it's a very lovely poem. If you read it, the first few lines, I thought it could be referring to Tessa because it's talking about a beautiful immortal woman. But as you keep reading, you will notice that the poem, its tone and its words get darker and darker, and they start talking about bitterness and treason and death more and more. And actually, how fitting is it that we started with a chapter that was called Bitter and Sweet, and now towards the end of it we go back to this feeling of bitterness. And usually when we're talking about bitterness in the last hours, we're associating that with Tatiana. At one point I even entertained the idea that it could actually be about Lilith. I don't want Lilith to be back. I am sick of Lilith, but to be fair, she was mentioned at the beginning of Chain of Iron in the first chapter when Cordelia goes to the Hell Rule. So I'm just going to hope that this refers to Tatiana. I just want to read you one line in the poem where it mentions the title of the chapter. It says, "Will ye take her to chain her with chains, who is older than all ye gods?" And it's interesting how this verse alone features the word chain twice. Obviously, chains are very important in the last hours. Each book title is about a different chain, and I do believe that Tatiana has to do with all of them. You know, she is chained, she's chained Grace to her in some way, and then she has tied Jesse to this world in another way, and then she has made sure that Grace tied James to herself via the bracelet. So there are definitely a lot of chains associated with Tatiana, and I want to believe that this is about her and not Lilith.
27, 28 we're not going to do, which means I have the privilege of doing 29, the last chapter in Chain of Iron, Broken Mirror. If we are correct in thinking that this book will sadly be the downfall of Matthew Fairchild, I think the title Broken Mirror could refer to James and Matthew's broken Parabati bond. So we get the sense that having a Parabati is like having a mirror. You can see your true self through the other person. Alas, having a Parabati is like having a mirror. I think you can see where this is going. Okay, to sum it all up, me and Fede think this book is going to start as a Jordelia wedding / post-marital bliss. Struggles are then going to start to emerge as more secrets are kept between characters. This will cause issues, especially with Lucy and Cordelia's Parabati training, Matthew's home life, Cordelia and Cortana. There's going to be some mad serial killer bits in the middle, leading ultimately to the fate of Matthew Fairchild and Jesse Blackthorn's resurrection. The rest of the book, Anna and Ariadne, Tom Stair, even Will and Jessa, we honestly have no idea how, when or where that is going to go down in the book. So I hope you guys enjoyed mine and Fede's intense analysis of these chapter titles. I will leave her social media handles in the description below so you can go follow her on there as well. Like this video if you have enjoyed it, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Equally, remember that I do have my Chain of Gold analysis series on this channel, and I will leave a link to that below. So I will leave you with a new theory that has recently popped up in the Shadowhunter fandom, and that theory is that this so-called big twist in the love triangle between Cordelia, Matthew and James is that Matthew isn't in love with Cordelia, but is in fact in love with James himself. And on that note, I'll see you guys later.
And on this note, I am just going to say, if you are a desperate Jordelia shipper searching for reasons to keep hoping, you should visit my Tumblr, where I host a column called the Jordelia Help Desk. You can come and read my posts about why I think we should have faith in Jordelia, and you can ask me questions, and I love to analyze bits and pieces of the books.